Alrighty, I think I am live. Welcome to the stream today, everybody. So today we're going to be answering ChatGPT's top questions. So as you can see in the title, my goal today is to answer as much as I can from the strength and conditioning world in under 30 minutes. So we will have a timer going. We're also going to get a ChatGPT prompt going. The point of the activity today is to prove to everyone that most things when it comes to strength and conditioning, most things when it comes to training are actually pretty simple. And most of the time, people actually have the answers for themselves. It's very easy to make things really complex, and the whole thing that I do on this channel is take one question and expand it out a few different ways to explain it in depth, because the depth is important to understand. However, for most people, what they actually need is for things to be simplified down to a basic form so that it can be something that can be easily applied into your everyday life. So with that being said, what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the top 60 questions in 30 minutes. So obviously that means one question every 30 minutes, which is a lot. So the goal is going to be to fly through these. Anything that needs just a quick answer, yes, no, whatever it is, then we're going to just give it that. And my strategy here is that if I give enough questions those kinds of answers, then the rest of the things that actually need some level of explanation to answer them, I'm going to be able to provide that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to display. You will see, actually, let me switch that around so that you can see the full ChatGPT. What we're going to do here is we're going to put that there then, and then I'm going to put a little timer here. Let me find my timer, or it would be clock app, wouldn't it? Cool. Let me grab a stopwatch, and we're going to put that down here. I'm also going to ask for the prompt. No way that is as small as it goes. All right, we're going to start it and then we're going to hide it a little bit. All right, so our prompt is, I would like to find out most of what I need to know about strength and conditioning. As a new trainee / athlete, what are the top / first 60 questions you ask? I reckon that's a pretty good prompt. Whatever this gives me, I'm going to answer. Let's let it fill out. All right, why am I training? Whoa, these are going to be a few. These are going to take some time. All right, so it's giving me 6 different sections. All right, I like this. Alrighty, I'm going to be answering these questions in 30 minutes. So, the other rules here. Not everything is going to have to get written down. So, I've brought this up just so that I have something to show thoughts on easily. Let me make that a little bit smaller. However, where something needs to be explained, it will be on here. Otherwise, I'm just going to be answering it and I'm going to be flying through the text. Let's go here. Our stopwatch. We are going to start. So, question number 1, what is strength and conditioning actually for? So, strength and conditioning allows us to build up the physical capabilities that let us perform better, both just health wise and in life. So when it comes to health, being able to build up muscle mass, being able to build up bone density and all that kind of stuff is really, really important. But on the flip side, for performance, being able to build up our speed and our strength and all that kind of stuff just isn't able to happen quickly enough just through your sport. When we talk about getting fitter, so question number 2 here, when we talk about getting fitter, fitness is just talking about what qualities you need in your day-to-day life or in your sport. And a fitness level is how good you are at those, essentially. So strength, you are fitter in terms of strength if that is improving your life or towards your goals, and you are stronger so you can lift more weight. How is strength and conditioning different from just exercising? I really like that. So when we talk about exercise is just any sort of movement that is good for your health, essentially. So walking, all that kind of stuff. Whereas strength and conditioning, it's specifically when you are trying to improve specific qualities for an outcome. So whether that outcome is more pull-ups or whether that outcome is speed on the rugby field, that is what it is. What physical qualities matter most for my sport or goal? This is a lot more of a general question. Generally, when you're looking at physical qualities to figure out which ones are most important for your sport or goal, I would look at what qualities either are going to have the biggest impact on your making your sport skills easier, or what necessarily is holding you back. So if people are beating you down the court, then you should probably be faster. How do I know if a program is working? You should be seeing consistent progress, both in the lifts that you are doing, if a program is working, but also see that translate over to the field or sport. So if things don't get easier over time on the court or on the field, then it probably isn't working. And also if your numbers are always stagnant or you're having to artificially put them up, as in like you're not actually getting stronger, you're not actually improving your capability, then it is not working. What does progress actually look like beyond sweat and soreness? Similar answer here. I'm going to get a gimme here. You need to be improving your numbers in some sort of way. That's why testing is so important. Whether that's speed testing, whether that's jump testing, whether that is just weight on the bar. What are realistic timelines for improvement? This depends on what your goals are. Realistically, you can see improvement. If you haven't ever trained before, you can see improvement in your base numbers for lifts in the first two or 3 weeks, right? But if you have a bigger goal, it's a bigger timeline. So that depends a lot on the individual person and where you're going at. And it's a really good question to start early on. What should I prioritize for first as a beginner? So when we talk about our qualities, we talk about the different levels that they can be on. I'm going to use this. So everything builds on top of each other, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't work on this stuff early, but it does mean that this stuff needs to be a focus, at least while you're doing that. Now, this stuff down here is our stuff like strength, hypertrophy, endurance. Whereas the stuff up here is like speed, power. Yeah. So the stuff that is quicker and is more difficult and more technical to express is going to come after something that is slower, stronger, bigger movements. Why do strong athletes tend to be more resilient? So by building this base, they are improving the amount of load that they're able to take, because most injuries come back to load management. If you are doing more than what you physically can over an extended period of time, that's why you get injured. Whereas if you have a bigger base, if you build this foundation strong so that nothing can crack it, then it's going to make it so that you're less likely to get injured and you're more able to do more. And you'll see as you build your capacity, you're actually able to train more often, play more often, all that kind of stuff with less like soreness and all that. How does training reduce injury risk? Exactly that. So by building up a level of strength this is also like related to like your tendon thickness and stiffness when you're doing plyometrics and jumps and stuff like that. It's your body physically builds up to tolerate what you expose it to, and training specifically allows you to control that exposure so that you can build it over time. Whereas if you rely on your sport, you have no control. What is strength physiologically? So when we talk about strength, there's a couple of things that affect it. Number one, it is literally the size or the amount of muscle fibers that you have, or you can't affect the amount. So the size of the muscle fibers that you have and how much they're able to pull. Whereas so that's one side, and then the other side is our brain's ability to send signals to it. So that's a neuromuscular component. So how able is your brain able to say go, fire to those muscle fibers that you do have? Why is getting stronger usually the first priority? Comes back to this. So if we build up that foundation really, really strong, if we give ourselves a really strong foundation to build off of, then it makes it so that speed and power and plyometrics and everything above that are easier to expose and develop. I use the example of if you can only squat 100 kilos, there's no way that you can jump with 100 kilos on your back. And while it's a crude example, it illustrates just that. What's the difference between absolute and relative strength? This is a good one. So absolute strength is just talking about the number on the bar or the exact speed or whatever, or the exact distance that you jump. So it's an absolute strict number. Whereas relative strength is more about what that is compared to my body weight. And the reason that that's useful is because the bigger the body weight you have, the more that you expect to be able to lift at your top level. Obviously, the genetic components and so many other things, but just that body weight figure is going to affect things, just like how height is going to be something that adapts your ability to jump further. How strong is strong enough? So there's lots of numbers that get thrown out here. Some people say that you got to be able to squat 2 times your body weight before you actually improve in sprints and all that kind of stuff. Realistically, that number is going to be different for everybody. I am a very big proponent of strength is something that you can continue to build throughout your whole training life. But at a certain point, you just look at the amount of juice that you get for the squeeze that you get. So once you stop getting really big benefits in your speed out of a little improvement with strength, then you can slow down a little bit with it. Most people, that's about the 2.5 times body weight mark for something like a squat. Why do compound lifts matter? Compound lifts can be really, really useful because you're able to, train a whole bunch of muscles in different muscle groups in them. It uses lots of different like stabilizers and all that kind of stuff. But then also there is a really big control element of being able to keep your mass over your base of support, keep balance over time. That's actually really beneficial for sport athletes. Additionally, it can be easy to get a lot of stimulus out of not many movements. Are machines bad or misunderstood? They're definitely not bad, okay? I'm a big user of machines, and I love them for athletes all the time. You just need to use them in the right context. So they are very, very good for having a very stable movement where you can have a lot of output and build a lot of strength in a specific muscle group. What role does technique play in strength gains? Well, the better your technique, the more you're able to subject your muscles to actually improve your muscle growth, right? So if you've got really, really poor technique, then already you can chop off 20, 30, 40 kilos off of a lift. And for us to be able to make a muscle stronger, we need to be able to expose it to more force or make it generate more force, which means that we're not actually going to be able to get there and it's going to take us a lot longer. You're going to have to be a lot stronger to get a certain number of output. Why does lifting heavy improve athletic performance? This exact reason here. So when we build up our base, it makes it easier to build those other things that are considered more athletic, like speed, like power, and all of that. So we're building up that base to do that and jump off of. What's the relationship between strength and speed? We're giving that base ability to produce force so that then in speed, we can then try and produce it faster. Additionally, it does improve those components like your neuromuscular system being able to shoot off more messages and all that kind of stuff. How often should strength be trained? Realistically, you can maintain strength in most muscles with just like a couple exposures a week. And that's an exposure to the specific muscle. So like bench would be an exposure to your pec, to your front delt, to your tricep, to all those muscles. So it doesn't mean that you need 2 exercises per muscle. But realistically, for most athletes, they can get away with a couple 45-minute sessions a week. Everything on top of that is a bonus and we'll probably let them improve quicker. How should a training week be structured? So my take on how a training week should be structured is that there's a lot that you can actually factor into it. The really big thing with structuring a training week is that each thing needs to be given its best ability to actually be expressed well, right? So if you in a week have let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exposures, there needs to be enough rest break in between each one of these to where each one of them can be done well. Yeah. So if this time is too short, then you don't give yourself the ability to do that. You can play around with this based on the quality that you're also training. Certain things don't need as much rest before or after. How many days per week should you train? In terms of strength, I generally recommend for an athlete that actually wants to be moving forward 2 or 3, depending on where they are, what their history is and all that, for strength training. And then having some sort of jumping or speed training twice a week as well can be great. My minimum for speed though is 1 for when people are in season. So if somebody's already playing a game a week or that kind of stuff, then that also helps with the speed stuff. What is a training block and why does it exist? So a block of training is 1 unit of using a similar program. Yeah. So that can be 2 weeks or it can be 20 weeks, doesn't matter. But it's where you are focusing on the same big goal. So it might be like get my squat number up, and it might be jumping distance, right? It might be like a broad jump or something like that. So you have 1 focus point for that training block. How long should a program run before changing? I made a video about this the other week. You should keep on training until your gains slow down. So if this one is time, trying to be quick here. And if this is gains, let's just do a big G for gains. Initially, you're always going to see a lot of improvement. Yeah. You want to keep a training block going until this starts to peter off and starts to go that slow there. If you see this point here, where for 1, 2, 3 weeks, you've been at pretty much the same numbers across a number of different things, then you should probably move on. That can be at 6 weeks, that can be at 20. It just depends. What should dictate exercise selection? Your goals should dictate exercise selection. Your needs should dictate exercise selection. So if you've got like an injury, that should dictate your exercise selection because you have a rehab goal. You have needs as far as your rehab goes. If you have a number of different things, if you have a goal of squatting more, then you should probably squat. That is what should be dictating your exercises. How much volume is enough? So like I said earlier, generally I look at least 2 exposures to each muscle group per week, typically about 2 to 4 sets. Intensity also matters here, and I say the next question, but intensity also matters here, but you just need to get a volume where you maintain, and that's going to be very individual. What does intensity actually mean? So intensity is what percentage, let's go here, what percentage of your maximum you are working at, yeah? So that's 1, that is 10, right? That it is going to be where on this scale you are, yeah? And the higher up the scale, you're working more on qualities like strength and power and all that kind of stuff. And the lower down the scale you go, the less benefit that you get in terms of that kind of stuff as well. Yeah. So how does sets and reps affect adaptation? So depending on what sets and reps you set yourself up with, it's going to give your body a different ability to actually work through a certain like criteria, right? So like if you've got a speed movement or a power movement, right? Like let's say that you're doing power cleans, you can't do 5 sets of 20 power cleans because by the 4th or 5th one, you've lost a lot of ability to express power. So all of a sudden, that becomes an exercise that you need to have a lot less weight on, and it just almost becomes endurance. Yeah, so they're going to affect the type of adaptation that you get. Whereas on a power clean, I'd be looking for like 1 to 4 reps, and 4 reps is like almost stretching it for some people per set. And then again, same thing with sets. As long as you can recover to it, then you're going to be fine in that kind of respect. It kind of depends a little bit more on what your session structure is like. What is progressive overload and how do you apply it? So progressive overload is week 1 being here, week 2 being there, week 3 being there. And it doesn't always need to be linear like that. Like you might hang out here for a few weeks, but progressive overload is adding weight to your lift over time. There's things like double progressions where like you can, when you get stuck here, reduce the amount of reps so that the weight can go up. But it's just about continuing to push your load and your ability. I am behind schedule here. When should I not push progression? You should not push progression if you're getting pain or if technique falls apart. We're going to simplify some of these. I'm behind. What movement patterns should every athlete train? So when we talk about movement patterns, we're talking about our squat. We're talking about our hinge, or like our deadlift kind of movement. We're talking about lunges, push, pull, brace, rotate, and flex, right? So those are our different movement patterns. My opinion is that athletes should train all of it. These are also important because they are the same movements that we do in sport. Even if you don't necessarily push or pull something, maybe your sport is just based on running or anything like that, our body works as a whole unit. Yeah. So even though squats and hinges might be more important for an individual person, it doesn't mean that there is not value to be gained from upper body or from grip strength. I don't know why it's including carries in this group. But yeah. How do I know if an exercise suits my body? So there is a personal element, right? Like one thing that you will know if you've ever trained somebody that's really, really tall, or trained with somebody that's really, really tall, is that they generally struggle with things like squats a little bit more than people that are shorter, or there's a whole bunch of different things. Generally, anyone can do almost any exercise, right? Like I would hesitate, unless you've got some sort of injury or impairment, I would hesitate to say that anyone couldn't learn a specific exercise, but certain things will be more easy and more easy to push weight on for certain people. So somebody who is really tall who might struggle to squat more, while we might have some sort of squat movement in there for learning, we could just do something like a leg press to get a little bit more out of it if we're chasing progression. Should I chase perfect technique or just lift? Somewhere in the middle, right? There are times to just lift heavy and push yourself, and there are times to work on your technique. I generally think that technique should come before just lifting hard, yeah? So work on that technique, build it up, and then you give yourself the license to just push hard sometimes. What's the difference between mobility and flexibility? Mobility is actively going into a position. Flexibility is how far you can possibly go into. So you might think about how far behind can I push my arm, versus if somebody were to push here or I was going up against a wall, that would be my flexibility. How do warm-ups actually work? So warm-ups increase your heart rate, so they push more blood around the body. It physically, literally warms up your muscles and your joints, so they feel a little bit better, because when something is warm, it moves a bit better. And it also gets your nervous system firing. So a lot of the time you can feel a little bit sluggish. After a warm-up, you should feel like you can react and be quicker. It also gets you mentally in the technique of things as well, depending on how you do it. Do I need corrective exercise? Very individual question. Most people probably don't need as many corrective exercises as they need. The way that I define a corrective exercise is something that puts us in a certain position or addresses a certain deficiency or something like that. I think that some things that fit as corrective exercises can be just put in anybody's program, but I don't think that most people need to address really minute, most people probably don't need a glute med specific exercise because they've got their glute meds off. It just doesn't happen. How do I address weak points without overthinking them? Again, very individual thing. I think that the really big thing is to frame these weak points as just an area that I'm working on, right? It is something that I personally need to develop. So it's just another part of my program. When should unilateral exercise be used? I think most of the time. I think that most of the time there's some sort of value in having unilateral variations in our program. You can't have everything be unilateral because that makes the program take a really long time and doesn't necessarily give us that much benefit. But I think the unilateral exercise is very useful so that you can build up strength across both limbs, because sometimes you can kind of cheat out. And also just build control and ability to move in certain ways. How much variety is useful versus distracting? Really good question. So you should be able to build in technique and build ability with a specific movement over time. It shouldn't be a thing of every single time that you're exercising, you're trying to figure out something new, especially with the qualities that you need to move forward, right? So if you've got a really big focus on squat and lower body strength, then maybe you can switch up your upper body variation relatively frequently, every 1 or 2 weeks, for a bench or something like that. But you just need to make sure that it's not detracting from your overall goal. Here we go. I'm right on time. What's the difference between strength and power? So strength is the amount of force that you can produce total. Power is how much you can do it quickly. Yeah. So if we go a force graph, that's time. This is going to cook me. That is strength. Strength is the total number that you can get to. Whereas power, we should see a quicker rise to get to that force. Typically, your strength number is going to be bigger, but obviously you're applying it over less time, and that's going to have a quicker drop off as well. How should power training be introduced? That's a weird question. I think that it should be introduced just like anything else. Throw it in your program, start with something that is achievable but challenging, and go from there. How does sprinting fit into training? Sprinting is really important if you want to maintain some level of speed. You literally cannot get the same amount of force production out of much else, especially in that kind of like movement. So additionally, there's also a technique component. So realistically, sprint should be you should be trying to make space for sprinting in your training and fitting your strength around that, because strength probably isn't quite as it's not as pedantic about what it needs to be able to develop and go forwards. What does conditioning actually train? So conditioning is training our body's ability to use oxygen to produce force. So a lot of the time, especially when you're talking about things like marathons and like long distance running and all that kind of stuff, long distance swimming, whatever, it is limited by our body's ability to take energy from oxygen or use oxygen to replenish energy stores to then express force again. So it's improving our heart's ability to pump blood around the body. It's improving our ability to breathe in and all that kind of stuff so that we can continue to produce force for a longer time. Why is conditioning sport specific? Because it can look different depending on the sport, right? So if you're swimming, you have different needs placed on you, right? If you are playing basketball, which is a lot shorter of a distance compared to something like football, where you might be running 50, 60 meters at a time, then you need to be able to make use of that oxygen at different rates in different ways. So it can be sport specific. A lot of it is quite general. So it's not gonna change completely. It's still gonna look pretty similar. But you definitely do need to think about the sport when you're planning conditioning. How do I avoid conditioning ruining strength gains? Generally, this isn't really a problem, right? This is a really like old style question. But where conditioning can kind of hurt our strength gains is when you're placing that conditioning right before a strength session, right? Or your volume from your conditioning gets too big, right? So it can be hard to balance both of these at an extraordinarily high level, especially if you don't have any sort of structure when you do things. So generally it won't. You just need to put things in the right order. How hard should conditioning feel? So conditioning, you can actually get a lot of gains without it feeling impossible. So strength, you need to be at a certain intensity level. There is an element of just getting a level of volume with conditioning that is quite good. Generally, you probably want to use the talk test as a guide. So if you can, while you're running, be talking, or just get out like your McDonald's order or something like that, then that's probably the baseline. What is the role of aerobic fitness for athletes? The role of aerobic fitness is, number one, being able to perform at a higher level for longer. And then two, being able to recover from things quicker, right? So if I've got better conditioning, I'm going to be able to keep on performing in the fourth quarter and stuff like that, closer to my 100% than somebody who's got worse conditioning. And if I've got better conditioning as well, a session that might take me 2 days to recover from before I do the next one might only take me a day, because my heart physically is better at making me recover. Why do some athletes gas out despite being fit? A lot of the time this has to do with the type of fit that they are. A lot of the time people will just run 5Ks to get fitter, but then they get back to their sport and they realize that high intensity actually feels quite a bit different. How do I balance speed, power, and endurance? Again, it's all around how you fit it in your training week, right? See where speed works and doesn't work, and see where endurance works and doesn't work. Realistically, endurance you can kind of throw wherever you need. So if your endurance sessions are affecting your speed, just move these to closer after the speed session rather than before. All right, last lot of 10 here, 5 minutes. How much rest do I actually need? super individual question. You need enough to where your performance doesn't dip too much. So this is, I'm going to do another graph. This is your performance. You should be, if your performance is here, when you train, it is going to dip. You need to wait for your ability to perform to get at the same level or even a little bit higher. That did a weird graph. Why is sleep the biggest performance enhancer? Because, number one, most people don't sleep enough. I'm in this category. Number two, because it makes everything else that your body does better and easier. How sore is too sore? How sore is too sore? When you cannot physically move or when you cannot perform at all the next day, then you are too sore. Again, this kind of is a bit individual, but you want to be able to meet your requirements for the week. When should I back off training? When you are starting to feel pain, when you are starting to feel, or an injury comes on, that is a really big sign that you should back off training. If you start to feel fatigued in and outside of training consistently for a couple of weeks, it's probably a sign that you're probably pushing a little bit too hard and need a deload. And also if your numbers are no longer going up. What's the difference between fatigue and overtraining? Fatigue is a natural response. This dipping in performance is an amount of fatigue that we have. Whereas overtraining is when you are pushing yourself too hard to where your body can't actually produce any results. Fatigue is normal. Overtraining is something that we need to manage. How does stress and life affect training outcomes? So when we are training, we are placing stress on our body. And a lot of the time, the body can't actually differentiate between just life and mental and anxiety and all that, those kinds of stresses, and the physical stress that you're putting on it. So it has similar reactions inside the body, and by placing too much of both, then all of a sudden you run into something where it's similar to overtraining, where you're just doing too much to it. How should nutrition support training? Nutrition should allow your body to do the things that training requires. So it should provide the energy so that you can actually rock up to training and push harder. But it should also provide all of the things that let you recover after the session. What role does body weight / composition really play? So body weight is going to affect the amount that you're able to push your body. So obviously that relative body weight to your strength is going to be important. You might be the strongest person in the world, but if you're also the heaviest person in the world, you might not be able to jump very high, right? Because you need to move yourself against gravity. Whereas if you are the strongest person, but you're pretty lean, then you're going to be able to relatively jump higher, all that kind of stuff. So body weight can affect things. Also, body weight affects like health. How do I stay consistent long term? I have left myself a little bit of time here. Lovely. So consistency comes back to our ability to be able to repeat what we're doing over time. And that means that we need to make sure that we don't overreach and make things unattainable. But it also means that we need to actually provide something that is giving ourselves some sort of challenge over time. There's a lot of things that play into somebody being consistent. And as a coach, I have had plenty of people that I have failed this balance with, and they've just disappeared into the ether. And then I've had plenty of people that went from not ever really being able to string more than a couple of weeks of training together to becoming trainees for literally years at a time. So the really big thing is addressing the things that make it more difficult for you to train and reducing those barriers, and then making training exciting. The more exciting you make training and the less barriers that you have in between you and training, then the more likely you are to continue doing it. And lucky last, what habits separate athletes who last from those who burn out? Athletes who last look at the training process like a game. They look at it like something to play over the long term. Whereas people who burn out are the ones that see a goal that they decide that they want, and they just like bash their head against a wall to try and do that. You need to have a level of grit, right? Like, I have nothing against like pushing hard and training and pushing yourself to your limits. But that being said, if you identify something and you don't have some sort of long-term plan to get to it, then it reduces our ability to outlast the competition. And realistically, people who get gains, they get gains over years, not weeks. So it's really, really important that you pace yourself in a way that allows you to actually achieve that. 29:56. That's 60 questions in 29 minutes. That's actually, I like that. I'm going to grab a big drink of water. And I am going to thank you for joining me today. As usual, thank you very much for joining me. I'm just going to check here 1 second. Yeah, we're sweet. So thank you as always for joining me on today. That was a lot of fun. Obviously, there is a lot more depth that we can go into than what's necessarily shown in all of those answers, right? Like, I tried to provide some level of context, but there's a lot of, it depends. There's a lot of, depending on your situation, what you're trying to achieve and all that kind of stuff. The really, really important thing is that there is some sort of interplay. Like, I am a very big believer that when you are training, you should understand what you are doing and why you're doing it to a degree. But also, that being said, we need to simplify things sometimes. We need to identify that most things are easier than what we make them. So reduce those barriers, take those answers for what they are, but also don't be afraid to delve in a little bit more if you want to understand the nitty gritty of it so that you can apply it better. And that, luckily, is what the rest of this channel is about. So every single week I'm putting up videos. At the moment, I'm at record-breaking pace for me. But every single week I'm putting up videos and I'm doing live streams talking about the different things that can affect your training and improve your training. So make sure to, if you like a little bit more depth and if you would like to see me explain many of these concepts with a lot more depth, first of all, leave a question so that I can know to make a video about it sooner rather than later. Second of all, subscribe and stick around so that you can see those when they go up. If you got any questions, like I said, let me know. Leave them in the chat. Leave them in the comments. But otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Have a good rest.